This elderly man in his 70s is a devilish father, who cruelly imprisoned his biological daughter in a basement, and assaulted her for 24 years. As many as over 3,000 acts of abuse led to his daughter giving birth to 7 children. But in the eyes of outsiders, the old man was a great philanthropist, and his act of kindness was also reported by many media outlets. What on earth is going on here, and how did the old man manage to imprison his daughter for more than 20 years? Without being discovered, April 19, 2008, a 73-year-old man, looking flustered, walked into a hospital in Austria with a girl. The doctor asked about the patient's basic information. The old man said his name was Joseph, and the girl who had fainted from illness was named Kristen, 19 years old, and she was his daughter's child. Later, the doctors gave Kristen emergency treatment but found many suspicious points. First, Joseph, an old man, was neatly dressed, but Kristen was unkempt, all skin and bones, and obviously suffered from long-term malnutrition at a glance. Moreover, her teeth were severely decayed. Worst of all, after the doctor's examination, they were shocked to find that Kristen had a rare disease. Normally, if someone has such a disease, the family should have taken the child for treatment earlier, but after checking for a long time, the doctors couldn't find any medical records of Kristen at all. Even more absurdly, they couldn't even find Kristen's identity information. This means that in the 19 years since the sick girl was born, she had no household registration, never went to school, and never saw a doctor. It's impossible that she suddenly popped out of a rock crevice at the age of 19, right? Realizing there was something fishy going on, the doctors called the police immediately. After the police arrived, they cooperated with the doctors to conduct an investigation, and the final result shocked everyone, because Kristen turned out to be Joseph's biological daughter. His daughter's daughter was actually his own daughter. Joseph was both the grandfather and the father. These shocking pieces of information told the police that Joseph not only committed incest with his biological daughter, but also had children with her. So the police continued their in-depth investigation, and found that Joseph was simply a beast and a devil, for he had assaulted his own daughter for as long as 24 years. The person who had lived such a hellish life for so many years was named Elizabeth, a native of Austria, born in 1966. Her mother was named Rosemary, and her father was Joseph. There were 7 children in the family. Elizabeth was the 4th child. She was different from others since childhood. The other children were as well behaved as their mother, but Elizabeth was very rebellious. She hated staying at home and usually either smoked, drank alcohol or fought. Even at the age of 15, she wanted to drop out of school, move out to live on her own, and find a job as a restaurant waitress to support herself, which made her parents very troubled. But her mother would at most scold her a little. But Joseph was different. He not only strictly controlled Elizabeth's behavior, but also often sneaked into her bedroom, rummaged through her diary and various personal items, and closely monitored every move of his daughter. The stricter he was, the more rebellious Elizabeth became, and she was determined to escape this suffocating home. But after all, she was just a child. Although she ran away from home several times, she was finally taken back by force, because every time Elizabeth left, Joseph would call the police and ask them to help find her and bring her back. He troubled the police several times in a row. In the end, Joseph went completely crazy. In order to prevent his daughter from running away from home again, he came up with an evil idea. In 1984, when Elizabeth was 18 years old, Joseph sent his wife and others away. Then he took Elizabeth into the basement. The reason was that a door couldn't be opened, and he wanted his daughter to help him break it open together. Elizabeth didn't think much and followed him down, and she really put in effort to keep ramming the door. Joseph took the opportunity to walk behind her, pulled out a handkerchief sprayed with medicine, and suddenly covered her mouth and nose. Elizabeth struggled for a few seconds, and then fell into a complete coma. When she woke up again, she was shocked to find that there were iron chains tied to her body, and the other end of the chains was wrapped around the pipes in the dimly lit basement. Elizabeth was terrified and screamed for help with all her strength. But even though her throat became hoarse from shouting, no one came to rescue her. Soon after, Joseph walked into the basement. Elizabeth begged her father to save her immediately, but instead of helping to untie the iron chains, he even started to touch her inappropriately. In no time, Elizabeth was stripped completely naked, because the iron chains were so strong. No matter how hard she struggled, she couldn't break free. Finally, Joseph, having gotten what he wanted, left contentedly, but he didn't untie the chains when he left. Instead, he shut the door ruthlessly. Elizabeth felt very painful and helpless, and this wasn't the first time Joseph had abused his daughter. He had done such beastly things long before. It was just that Joseph was like a ruler at home, and no one dared to disobey him. Therefore, all the children were very afraid of him. Elizabeth, in particular, dared not tell the truth. This was also the reason why she became rebellious later, unwilling to continue living under the shadow cast by her father. She ran away from home many times, but she never expected that all her attempts would fail in the end, and now she was even locked up. The basement where Elizabeth was held was very narrow, its height was only a little over 1.6 meters, and its area was just 35 square meters. Besides a bed and a narrow passageway, there was only a very shabby toilet, since there were no windows. It was pitch black inside without turning on the lights, but, unluckily, Elizabeth didn't have the freedom to turn the lights on or off. Only when Joseph came would he control the lights to turn on. Moreover, the entrance to the basement was hidden behind a cabinet, and very few people knew about it. In 1983, the municipal government approved Joseph's application to expand the basement. Later, Joseph built the basement, strong as a fortress and with very good sound insulation, according to the standards of a bomb shelter, which took him 5 years to complete. The door was made of 300 kilograms of pure steel. Only Joseph knew the password to open the door. Therefore, even if there were no iron chains binding her, after being locked in the basement, Elizabeth still couldn't get out, and after locking her up, Joseph even put on a deliberate show. He told his wife that their daughter had run away from home again, and urged her to call the police to find and bring her back. Later, the two of them did call the police, but this time, it was impossible for the police to find her at all, because she had never left the house and was there all along. About a month later, Joseph went to the police station with a letter. He said there was news about Elizabeth. In the letter she sent, she wrote that she was living with friends, and if they kept looking for her, she would go abroad and flee to another country. Then Joseph told the police that his daughter was probably already a member of a cult. Later, the police searched for a while longer but still found nothing. Seeing that Joseph and his wife had also given up hope, the police simply stopped searching too. By this point, Joseph had achieved his goal. Now everyone thought his daughter had run away and sunk into depravity, and no one looked for her anymore. In the following days, Joseph played the role of a gentle, family-oriented good man outside, working hard to support the many people in his family, but in the dark and terrifying basement, he completely revealed his true nature, a total beast and scoundrel. He never untied Elizabeth's restraints, and took time every day to assault her. Only when he was satisfied, would he leave a little water and food. He even made his daughter act out role plays, like those in pornographic films. If she refused to obey, he would beat, scold her, or withhold food. At first, Elizabeth fought back fiercely and screamed for help, hitting objects with things to make noise, but instead of salvation, she was discovered by her devilish father. Joseph angrily punished the disobedient Elizabeth. After beating and kicking her, he subjected her to even more brutal abuse. Even more viciously, Joseph would warn his daughter to stay well behaved, saying that he had electrified the steel door. He threatened that if she dared to approach it, and try to force it open or do anything to it, she would be electrocuted to death. Moreover, he had installed an automatic gas trigger device in the basement. If she tried to escape, the device would activate immediately, releasing a large amount of gas to poison her to death. Elizabeth felt very desperate upon hearing these words. She stopped trying to resist, and let her father turn on the lights, and abuse her every day when he came, and when he left, she would sink back into darkness and endless fear. She lived such a dark, hopeless life for a long time. Elizabeth became pregnant, and as time went on, her belly grew bigger and bigger. She thought her chance to escape had come. She planned to find an opportunity to run away, when her father took her to the hospital to give birth. But she overestimated Joseph's humanity and conscience. When Elizabeth begged her father to take her to the hospital, he instead threw her a pregnancy and childbirth guidebook, and a pair of scissors. He told her to give birth to the child by herself. In the basement, Elizabeth was very desperate, but her water had broken, and she had no choice but to give birth. Finally, she stood severe pain and gave birth to her daughter by herself. She had thought that with a child, her father would let her go, but the truth was that he remained as cruel and violent as before. The most infuriating thing was that every time Joseph abused Elizabeth, he didn't care at all that the child was right there beside them. He would also keep insulting and humiliating her during the process. Later, Elizabeth became pregnant many times. One of a pair of twins died shortly after birth. When Joseph found out, he showed no emotional reaction. Instead, he calmly disposed of the body in the stove. After that, he continued his evil deeds day after day. In the following period, Elizabeth gave birth to a few more children. Excluding the one that died, there were 6 children in total, but the basement was too small, and the more children there were, the more crowded it became. So Joseph came up with a plan, that was to forge another letter in his daughter's tone, and leave the letter together with the selected children. The letter said that Elizabeth had given birth to the children outside, and didn't want to raise them, so she left them with her parents. Then Joseph pretended to be a kind person, went through various procedures, and adopted the 3 abandoned children. Because of this incident, Joseph even became a well-known philanthropist. Many media outlets lied to report on them, saying that Joseph and his wife were full of kindness. It was already tiring enough to raise 7 children. It was unexpected that they would also selflessly adopt their abandoned grandchildren. It was very ironic. As time went by, although only Elizabeth and 3 children remained in the basement, the children grew bigger and bigger, and the basement became very crowded, which even hindered Joseph's evil acts. Finally, he decided to expand the basement, But he didn't want to do the work himself. Instead, he made Elizabeth and the 3 children work with their hands. The 4 of them had to dig the walls for several hours every day. After digging for a long time, they finally dug a water channel leading to the adjacent basement. Although the living space became a little larger, there were still no windows. Moreover, the water in the channel was smelly and swarming with cockroaches, mosquitoes, and rats. Elizabeth lived in such a damp and oppressive environment for 24 years. During this time, she begged Joseph bitterly and finally managed to get a TV, a radio, and a refrigerator. With these things, Elizabeth often told the children about the world outside. She said that paradise was outside the house and hoped that one day the children could feel the sunshine and fresh air. She also often taught the children to draw within the limited conditions. She tried her best to make the children feel happy. Some people might ask, Elizabeth was imprisoned for more than 20 years. Did her mother really never notice anything unusual, or did no one else notice any problems at all? In fact, Joseph's friends had been suspicious before. Once, when they went out for a trip, Joseph saw a very beautiful red dress on the way, and promptly bought it. His friends found it strange because, judging from the size, Joseph's wife couldn't fit into it at all. But it was easy to cover up this matter. Joseph would say he bought it for his daughter. On another occasion, a tenant, who rented a room on the first floor of Joseph's house, heard faint noises coming from the basement from time to time. While sleeping at night, he reported this to Joseph, who said that the pipes were in disrepair due to old age, and that he would find a way to fix it. But he warned the tenant not to go near the basement. Otherwise, the tenant would have to pack up and leave. As for Joseph's wife, it was very likely that she knew the basement existed, but her husband had a strong desire for control, and his status at home was comparable to that of a king. If she didn't resist him, she could live in peace. Otherwise, her fate would most likely be the same as Elizabeth's. In addition, his wife might have been timid by nature, so she always pretended not to know anything. And how was Elizabeth rescued later? In 2008, Joseph took his daughter to the hospital, where the doctors found many suspicious points and called the police. But why would a cold-blooded devil like him take the child to the hospital? In fact, after 19-year-old Kristen suddenly fainted, Joseph didn't take it seriously. It was Elizabeth who begged him non-stop, saying that Kristen would most likely die if she didn't go to the hospital. Upon hearing that someone might die, Joseph thought dealing with the body would be a hassle later, so he had to take the person to the hospital. After giving emergency treatment, the doctors examined Kristen's body and found that she had stunted growth, long-term malnutrition, severe failure of multiple organs, and so on. Most critically, she had a rare disease. The doctors searched for a long time, but found no medical records of Kristen at all. Joseph couldn't even provide her identity information. The doctors hoped to have the child's mother come to the hospital. Of course, Joseph didn't want Elizabeth to come, so he said Kristen was a child abandoned by his daughter, who had run away from home many years earlier. Upon hearing this, the doctors thought it was necessary to find the child's mother, and called the police immediately. When the police arrived and learned that the person to find was Elizabeth, they were shocked that she hadn't returned home after so many years, and immediately issued a missing person notice. Elizabeth, who was locked in the basement, also saw it on TV. Knowing that her daughter needed her for treatment, she kept begging Joseph to take her out and even swore that she would come back nice and quiet after saving the child. Joseph finally agreed because he thought Elizabeth, having been locked up for more than 20 years, would have long accepted her fate. But before leaving, he repeatedly emphasized that Elizabeth should say she had been detained in a cult, and only escaped desperately recently after learning someone was looking for her. After so many years, Elizabeth finally bathed in the sun again. She was 42 years old at the time, but due to years of suffering, she looked much older than her actual age. Soon, the father and daughter arrived at the hospital. The doctors and police asked many questions, but except for the few lines Joseph had taught his daughter to say, Joseph answered all other questions on her behalf. The doctors wanted Elizabeth to answer, but she dared not speak and her eyes were filled with fear. The police noticed something was wrong, and took her to another room alone to ask about the situation. But Elizabeth looked dejected and desperate, saying that even if she spoke, no one would believe her. People would only think she had been brainwashed by a cult, and it would bring trouble to her. The police repeatedly assured her that they would believe her and promised to protect Elizabeth's children. It took a lot of effort to finally find out what inhuman suffering Elizabeth had endured over these 24 years. Immediately after, the police took Joseph into custody, and rushed into the basement to rescue the children. Since the children were products of consanguineous reproduction, all of them suffered from congenital diseases. Moreover, because the basement was very short, they had long been afraid to walk with their backs straight, resulting in deformed spinal development. After being rescued, they still couldn't live a normal life at all. They were afraid of everything they saw, and even shunned normal food. It was estimated that they would need to receive long-term psychological treatment and guidance before they could adapt to normal human life. Meanwhile, Joseph had been arrested by the police. When the police reviewed the case records, they were shocked to find that he had actually committed a Crime decades earlier, in 1967, Joseph, who was in his 30s, assaulted a beautiful nurse. After being arrested, he was sentenced to 18 months in prison, but criminal records in Austria are only kept for 15 years, therefore, when he later applied to adopt children, and went through the qualification review, no one found out about his criminal record. When the police asked him why he had locked Elizabeth in the basement, and why he had abused her, leading to her pregnancies, Joseph said he didn't want his daughter to keep running away. He claimed the outside world was full of bad people, and staying at home was the safest option. As for why he assaulted his daughter, he said it was in his nature. He argued that if he didn't do this to his daughter, he might go out and do it to someone else. It was utterly insane. Moreover, there was another reason for him to imprison and assault his daughter. That was that the other children in the family had personalities like their mother, and no one dared to disobey him. Only Elizabeth had a personality like Joseph's. She was strong-willed, kept resisting, and tried to run away. This aroused Joseph's desire to conquer. Taming someone like her to obey him compliantly gave him an unprecedented sense of satisfaction. That was why he did those inhumane things to Elizabeth. After all this, psychiatrists finally concluded that he suffered from schizophrenia and severe personality disorders. Even more shocking, in-depth investigation revealed that Joseph had imprisoned more than just Elizabeth. Years earlier, he had also locked up his own biological mother. At this point, it's impossible not to mention Joseph's childhood experience. He was born in Amstetten, Austria, in 1935. His mother didn't love her children. She gave birth to her son only to prove that she was fertile. Joseph's father was even worse. Shortly after Joseph was born, his father abandoned his wife and child, claiming he had fallen for another woman, and cruelly took all the money with him when he left. His mother was deeply devastated. After that, she drank heavily every day, beat and scolded her son, and also made many rules. For example, he couldn't come home after 7 p.m., and he couldn't be friends with people who performed poorly in school. He wasn't allowed to say anything related to his father. If he violated any of these rules, he would be severely beaten. During an air raid in World War II, Joseph wanted his mother to take shelter in a bomb shelter, but his mother scolded him, telling him not to tell her what to do. In the end, she really didn't go into the bomb shelter with her son. This left Joseph with a constant sense of insecurity. Later, his mentality became distorted, and he developed the idea of assaulting his mother, but he didn't have the ability to act on it at that time, so he could only take his anger out on small animals, watching them struggle in agony on the brink of death. When he was 18 years old, Joseph felt he had the ability to take revenge on his mother, so he hardened his heart and locked her in the attic, and cruelly sealed the windows shut. He told others that his mother had run away from home. She was locked up like this for more than 20 years, and this farce finally ended only when his mother died. Perhaps he found the feeling of imprisoning and controlling others satisfying. Joseph renovated his basement, and a few years later, he personally locked his daughter in it. After being rescued, Elizabeth resented her mother's weakness in turning a blind eye, and resolutely cut off relations with her. Later, this case officially went to trial. At first, Joseph insisted that he locked his daughter in the basement to prevent her from being harmed outside, and from getting involved with contraband and bad people. But when Elizabeth bravely appeared in court, and tearfully accused him of his evil deeds, Joseph finally pleaded guilty. In the end, he was convicted of rape, imprisonment, abuse, enslavement, and other charges, and the judge sentenced him to life imprisonment. People had thought Joseph would realize his mistake and repent in prison, but the reality was quite the opposite. After going back prison, he still didn't behave. From time to time, he would call the prison guards to his side. He insisted that other inmates in the prison also had basements in their homes, and that there might be girls hidden in them, urging the police to investigate. By 2025, Joseph will be nearly 90 years old. It's said that his mental and physical condition has been deteriorating day by day. Doctors at the mental hospital examined him, and concluded that his old body was failing, and he had developed Alzheimer's disease, making him no longer capable of committing illegal or criminal acts. It may be possible to transfer him to a regular hospital. After Joseph was imprisoned, the police arranged new identities for Elizabeth and her children, to help them live a normal life. They also specially chose a quieter village for the family to live in, fearing that media reporters might disturb them for clicks. The police also arranged for several officers to provide secret protection. Later, Elizabeth's family gradually got their lives back on track. It's said that she also met true love, a bodyguard who was more than 20 years younger than her. The small family lived a happy and stable rural life, but later someone adapted Elizabeth's story into a film titled Room, which was released. The story follows a woman who was imprisoned in a basement, abused, gives birth to a child, and finally sees the light of day again after 7 years. But the film was still relatively conservative in its portrayal, compared with the villain portrayed in the film. Joseph was obviously far more terrifying. Finally, let's analyze the criminal psychology of the criminal. First of all, he had a very strong desire for control and possession. He didn't regard family members as independent individuals, but as his private property. Once anyone dared to resist him, he would feel a sense of crisis, believing that someone was trying to shake his supreme status. To make the other person obey him compliantly, he would lock them in a closed space under his control. In this space, he held the power to dominate and control the fate of others. After all, without the food he provided, the other person would die soon. Later, when Elizabeth gave birth to multiple children, the children also naturally became his private property, and had to obey him to help expand the basement. Secondly, Joseph definitely had antisocial personality disorder. He had no empathy or ability to sympathize at all, and was very good at pretending. During the decades he imprisoned his mother and Elizabeth, he pretended to be a good man in front of others, but was a complete devil behind their backs. He didn't care about the pain his daughter suffered from the abuse. Even after she became pregnant, he continued his perverted acts. He also completely ignored the severe pain she suffered. During natural childbirth, he even felt no guilt at all that his own children had to live in a small, dark space from the moment they were born. Finally, Joseph's childhood trauma led to distortions in his psychology and cognition, and he would rationalize his criminal acts through self-deception. Simply put, he repeatedly brainwashed himself into believing that his act of imprisonment was to protect his daughter. He thought that if he really let his daughter leave, the outside world would definitely harm her. Besides, he even regarded the abuse as a normal act. He was completely unaware that he himself was the most dangerous and terrifying person to Elizabeth. If you like my channel, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe.